She never raised her voice, never argued, and never demanded anything from anyone. If someone looked at her from the outside, they would assume she was just a quiet, ordinary woman with no confidence and no presence. She blended into the background so easily that people often forgot she was even there. And unfortunately, the person who believed this the most, was her own husband, Ethan Carter. Ethan was everything she wasn't: confident, successful, admired by everyone around him. At high-profile events, he was always the center of attention, while Lily stood quietly beside him, dressed simply, saying very little. People often whispered behind their backs, wondering why a man like Ethan would choose someone like her. Over time, those whispers turned into Ethan's own thoughts. One evening, at a formal dinner, someone casually pointed out, "Your wife is very quiet." Ethan laughed and replied, "She's just not that interesting." Lily heard every word. It cut deeper than he could ever imagine, but she didn't react. She didn't defend herself or create a scene. Because she wasn't weak. She was watching, listening, and learning. While everyone else was busy talking, Lily was observing everything: people, behaviors, business patterns, and hidden intentions. Her silence wasn't emptiness, it was strategy. And Ethan had no idea that the woman he considered insignificant was quietly understanding everything around her. The distance in their marriage didn't happen overnight, it crept in slowly, almost invisibly. At first, it was small changes. Ethan started coming home late more often, his replies became shorter, colder, and his attention drifted away from Lily. Conversations that once existed disappeared completely. His phone was always with him, always locked, always turned away. Lily noticed every detail, but she didn't ask questions because deep down, she already knew the answers. One night, Ethan didn't come home at all. The next morning, when he finally walked in, something about him felt different. It wasn't just his behavior, it was the unfamiliar scent, the subtle signs that someone else had entered his life. Lily calmly asked, "Were you busy?" Without even looking at her, Ethan replied, "Yeah." That moment confirmed everything. A few days later, Lily saw the truth with her own eyes. A name kept appearing on his phone: Sophia. The messages weren't innocent. They were filled with emotions, plans, and promises. Photos told the rest of the story. This wasn't just an affair, it was a replacement. Lily stared at the screen for a moment, then quietly locked the phone. She didn't cry. She didn't break down. Instead, she whispered to herself, "So, this is how it ends." But what she didn't say out loud was even more important. This wasn't the end for her. This was the beginning of something else, something far more powerful. Ethan didn't take long to make things official. One evening, he sat across from Lily with a cold, emotionless expression and said, "I want a divorce." There was no hesitation in his voice, no guilt in his eyes, just a decision he had already made. Lily looked at him calmly and asked, "Is there someone else?" Ethan didn't deny it. "Yes," he said plainly. The silence that followed was heavy, but not chaotic, it was final. Ethan grew slightly impatient and said, "Say something." Lily responded quietly, "What do you want me to say?" He expected tears, anger, or at least some resistance. Instead, he got calm acceptance. Frustrated, he asked, "Aren't you going to fight for this?" For a brief second, Lily almost smiled. Fight? For someone who had already left her emotionally long ago? "No," she said softly. "I'm not." Ethan leaned back, relieved. "Good. That will make things easier." That word, easier, echoed in the room. Lily slowly stood up and walked toward the window, staring outside as if processing everything. After a long pause, she turned slightly and asked, "Are you sure?" Without thinking twice, Ethan answered, "Yes." And in that exact moment, everything changed. Ethan believed this was the end of a failing marriage. But in reality, it was the beginning of a story he would never be able to control. When Ethan walked out of the house, he felt a sense of freedom he hadn't experienced in years. To him, it felt like he had finally escaped a dull and lifeless marriage. There was no more silence, no more emotional distance, just excitement and a new beginning with Sophia. For a while, everything seemed perfect. The laughter, the attention, the thrill of something new, it all felt worth it. But back at the house, Lily stood alone in complete silence. Yet she wasn't broken. She wasn't lost in memories or drowning in pain. Instead, she was thinking, calculating, and preparing. Her eyes slowly moved across the room, not looking at emotional memories, but at structure, control, and ownership. Then, calmly, she picked up her phone and made a call. "It's time," she said. That was all. And from that moment on, everything began to shift. Meetings were scheduled. Documents were activated. Connections that had been silent for years suddenly came back to life. Lily was no longer the quiet, overlooked wife. She was stepping back into her true identity, a woman who understood power, strategy, and control better than anyone around her. Her transformation wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was undeniable. And the most dangerous part? Ethan had no idea what was coming. At first, Ethan didn't notice anything unusual. His new life with Sophia kept him distracted, and he assumed everything else was running smoothly. But slowly, things began to fall apart. One business deal failed unexpectedly. Then another. And then another. At first, he blamed bad timing or incompetent employees, but as the problems multiplied, frustration turned into panic. "Fix this," he shouted at his team, but nothing seemed to work. Investors started pulling out, accounts were suddenly frozen, and important contracts were cancelled without explanation. The empire he believed he had built was collapsing piece by piece. Confused and desperate, Ethan struggled to understand what was happening. Then one day, he received a legal notice. At first, he didn't think much of it, but as he read through the documents, his entire world stopped. Everything he thought he owned, his company, his house, his assets, was never actually in his name. It was all under Lily's control. Always had been. The realization hit him like a shockwave. He was never the true owner. He was just the face, the visible figure, while the real power had always been hidden behind the scenes. And that power was Lily. With nothing left to lose, Ethan returned to the one place he once walked away from without hesitation. Standing in front of the same door, he felt something he had never felt before, uncertainty. When Lily opened the door, he barely recognized her. She looked the same, yet completely different. There was a calm confidence in her eyes, a quiet strength that made it clear she was no longer the woman he once knew. "Lily, please," he said, but this time his voice carried no authority, only desperation. Lily looked at him for a moment and replied softly, "No, now you listen." For the first time, Ethan was silent. "I gave you everything," she said, her voice steady and controlled, "and you treated it like it was nothing." Ethan lowered his gaze. "I made a mistake," he admitted. A faint smile appeared on Lily's face. "Yes," she said. "You did." And with those words, everything came to an end. Ethan lost his wealth, his reputation, and even Sophia, who walked away the moment his success disappeared. She was never in love with him, only with what he had. And when that was gone, so was she. As for Lily, she didn't celebrate or seek revenge. She didn't need to. She hadn't lost anything. She had simply taken back what was always hers. And in the end, the biggest lesson remained: never underestimate someone just because they choose to stay silent. Because sometimes, silence is not weakness, it's power waiting for the right moment.